the number one cause of estrangement. In 37% of all estrangements is political differences, lifestyle differences, differences of opinion and things like that. Really? The number one cause? That is the number one cause. It's not even abuse or anything. It's you think differently than I do.
I want to clear this up because I see these types of statistics, especially about political differences and estrangement, being thrown around a lot very incorrectly. And I believe that this creator is citing Carl Pilmer's work. And he wrote the book Fault Lines and did one of the largest studies that we have on family estrangement today. Carl Pilmer did a national study in the U.S. He surveyed around 1,300 adults, and he found that 27% of them were estranged from a family member, not specifically a parent, but just a person in their family. He found that there were several key contributors to becoming estranged. One of them was harsh parenting. There were financial disputes. And the one that this person is talking about that he did note was something about value and lifestyle differences. And underneath that category, we find things like value differences, political differences in sexual orientation or feelings about that, as well as religious differences in how you choose to live your life. His research did not show that the number one contributor in 37% of cases was political differences. I think differently than you think. It was one of the contributors, but it was not shown to be the main one, and there's no publicly available data about that percentage being tied to that. I do believe that he had talked about in an interview during COVID about speaking to a young woman who had talked about like how her father's stance on a certain political issue was what made her decide to end the relationship with him. But this was not like the number one thing that was focused on in his work. I also want to note that in Pilmer's work, he specifically speaks to the fact that it's often about value differences paired with poor communication. It's not just specifically about, I don't like what you think, so I cut you off. It's typically that we cannot find a way to relate, have a conversation, agree to disagree, etc., around our value differences. We may assume that a lot of the time this is coming from like people who do not have a lot of tolerance for how their parents are and things like that. We also see this coming from the top down. So there are parents who may disagree with a child getting divorced. I believe he talked about this in his work. They decide to no longer have a relationship with their child. There are parents who will disown their children because of their sexuality, who they've chosen to marry, their religious affiliation. And we also see this among children. I had a woman on Ask a Question on my podcast, Calling Home, the other day, who talked about how she was not able to have a relationship with her child, who was becoming much more religiously than she was. Pilmer also notes that increasingly hostile communication is often what leads people down the path of estrangement. And I agree with this anecdotally in my work. I find that a lot of people are becoming estranged, not necessarily because of the issue or the differences, but because they cannot find a way to communicate around that issue. I completely understand why this person is saying this data the way that they are, because of the way that it's often presented in a lot of articles is a little bit misleading, but I just wanted to clear that up.